Coming up on this episode of Colonial Crossfire, Donald John Trump is an impeached president, but will the Senate vote to remove him? A top Iranian military general was killed by U.S. forces. Was this the right move? And did we end 2019 with some bipartisanship in Congress? Well, regardless, brace yourselves, people. It's now 2020. Joining us on the left, Louis Kahn and Julian Anderson. And on the right, Zach Laba and Hunter Wilson. And I'm your moderator, Michael Schnell. From the GWTV studios in Washington, D.C., this is Colonial Crossfire. Hello, GW political junkies, and welcome back to campus. But more importantly, welcome to 2020. Happy New Year and happy election year. That's right, an election is happening this year. Better yet, an election is starting in less than 10 days from now. Even though right now it seems like 2020 is just background noise, considering the events that are unfolding in Washington. And yes, I'm talking about impeachment. It has completely inundated this country. And that's precisely because last month, President Trump received a permanent stain on his presidency, becoming just the third president to be impeached in United States history. And if you thought that was enough to make the country buzz, just 2 weeks later, literally 2 weeks later, President Trump ordered a military strike that brought the U.S. to the brink of war with Iran. Was it justified? Was there a suitable reason behind it? Well, that depends on who you ask. And let me remind you folks, it's only January. Now we'll cover all of that, but before diving in, be sure to take a look at our headline segment to get caught up on all the other important news that's happened in the past month. Check it out on our Facebook and YouTube pages, both at GWTV. Now, to tackle all these hot issues, our fantastic panel of GW's finest future politicians. On the left, Louis Kahn, a sophomore from Burbank, California, majoring in political science and political communication. Louis is the campaigns director of the GW College Democrats. And Julian Anderson, a freshman from Los Angeles, California, studying international affairs. Julian is the head of the debate committee for the GW College Democrats. And on the right, Zach Laba, a senior from Ewing, New Jersey, majoring in political science. Zach is the interim treasurer of the GW College Republicans and interned in the NRCC this past spring and summer. And Hunter Wilson, a senior from Perryton, Michigan, studying political science. Hunter is the chairman of the D.C. Federation of College Republicans and a former White House intern in the Trump administration. Thank you all for being with us this morning. So we'll start with impeachment this morning. On December 18th, like I said, President Trump became just the third president in American history to be impeached, joining Presidents Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton on the notorious list. Now, House Democrats, they sold their case, along party lines of course, that the president committed high crimes and misdemeanors, slapping him with two charges, Article 1, abuse of power, and Article 2, obstruction of Congress. Now, according to Article 2 of the Constitution, if a president is impeached in the House, he or she will go on trial in the Senate, where it's decided if the president should be removed from office or just acquitted of the charges. To make this move, though, from the House to the Senate proceedings, Speaker Pelosi had to sign and send the articles to the Senate, which would then trigger the start to the trial. Simple, right? Just send them across the building. What is it, a couple feet or so? Well, the Speaker had something else in mind, and she decided to hang on to those articles for a little bit longer. Nearly a month later, she did sign them, and now we are in the middle of a Senate impeachment trial. Those are the facts, so now let's discuss. Julian, we'll start with you first. Do you think that these two charges, Article 1, abuse of power, Article 2, obstruction of Congress, are grounds for removal?
Thanks, Michael. So absolutely, they're grounds for removal. President Trump the evidence shows that not only did he solicit an illegal campaign contribution through his actions by asking for an intervention from a foreign government into the presidential election of 2020 by asking them to get evidence that Biden or announce an investigation into Hunter Biden. All of this proves that he is irresponsible. His abuse of power is not fit for a president and therefore should be removed.
What's your response on the right? I have a feeling you're thinking differently here.
I would say I think a little differently. I guess one thing to clarify, when you brought up the bipartisanship aspect before, the only bipartisan aspect of this whole thing was a bipartisan vote against impeachment. Nancy Pelosi had said from the beginning that this needed to be compelling, overwhelming, bipartisan, and that's just not at all what we got. The squad completely and just radical House Democrats kind of forced their hand in this one. I mean,
so understand your point. Speaker Pelosi said it has to be compelling, bipartisan. However, if we look at the articles on hand, you don't think that the president abused his power, and you don't think that he obstructed Congress?
No, I mean, if you look at just specifically the language of these two, I mean, I guess take the first one itself. I mean, they've been trying to get something against him for, I mean, since he stepped into office here. I mean,
he's been abusing his power since he stepped into office.
Well, it was
not even a competition.
The Mueller report, and then Ukraine, and abuse of power, quid pro quo, bribery, extortion. They're poll testing these things on what the country would rather respond to. I mean, I guess if we can bring it back to the actual like topic of the charges at hand, though. Like, I mean, there's facts that remain, no matter how we want to slice it, that the aid was released to Ukraine. There was no investigation that was announced or promised. On the July 25th phone call, President Zelensky didn't even know that this aid was being withheld. Like, you can't have a quid pro quo without the quo. Like,
well, if you just wanted to come up here and repeat Republican talking points, we can do this all day, but
isn't that what
Louis,
we're supposed to do? Look, the Office of Management and Budget said that the president violated the law by withholding aid to Ukraine. The aid was withheld for a certain period of time. That is indisputable. That did happen.
Mm. Yeah, well, the aid was withheld there. Sorry, I'll let you jump in here.
It's a little funny to see that we act as if this is the first time aid has ever been withheld by a sitting president.
It is,
it was for political purposes.
That's the allegation.
That's why it was withheld.
The
he said so in the transcript.
To the Senate.
Did you read
There's a lot to cover in this topic, so we'll move on to the next question. So like I mentioned in the introduction, Speaker Pelosi really pulled a fast one on these senators and representatives, the American people, everyone, when in a presser on December 18th, the day she impeached Trump, just minutes after she said, you know, I may not actually send these articles over to the Senate. And she wasn't bluffing. She waited almost a month, and she said that she wasn't going to send them because she wanted to try to get leverage to see witnesses in this impeachment trial. So my question here is, do you think that Nancy Pelosi wasted time by holding the articles, or do you think this was worthwhile? Because in her opinion, she thinks that it was worthwhile because the American public now wants to see witnesses, and John Bolton now came forward saying if subpoenaed, he will testify. We're going to go to the Republicans first on this one.
I'm going to say it might have been worthwhile as a political stunt for her. But what you see now, that they've given the articles over to the Senate, and this fight for witnesses so early on, before opening arguments have even been made by either side. They want the Senate to do the job that the House of Representatives was supposed to do. They want the Senate to do the fact-finding when there was a laughable lack of any sort of concrete evidence of wrongdoing in the articles that were sent over. And now that they've realized that they do not have the compelling argument that Nancy Pelosi wanted to make, they need the Senate to try and do their job for them, put up people.
So you don't think it's worthwhile to have some of the president's close allies who say they're willing to talk in the trial?
Clearly there was no issue Nancy Pelosi had with delaying when these articles got to the Senate. If that was really her goal, she should have fought harder for that to happen in the House.
Right, but then
then turn the impeachment articles over.
But then the issue of the courts came into play.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. They wanted to get this impeachment thing done by Christmas. They didn't want to wait. They didn't want to go through the courts. They subpoenaed all these folks in the Trump administration. They responded legally to the subpoenas, outlining how they were unconstitutional. And then, tellingly, they didn't take them to court over these things.
Louis, jump in here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that one of the articles is obstruction of Congress, because when subpoenaed, many people failed to show up. But as we've seen since the House voted to impeach Donald Trump, you've seen John Bolton being willing to testify. He'll testify to a Republican Senate, not a Democratic House. That's clear. And then you've also seen the document done with Lev Parnas, which has some very damning information. And all this should be considered as new evidence. And for Mitch McConnell to say he doesn't want a fair trial, a vast majority of the American people, even a vast majority of Republicans, say that there should be a fair trial. Because if the president is innocent, as they may think he is, then when he want all the evidence, maybe he should testify himself.
Well, we know what Trump thinks of the Constitution. He said, Article 2 means, as president, I get to do whatever I want. So don't even talk about what Trump thinks of the Constitution, constitutionality of subpoenas. Second of all, to get back to the original question, I think it's too soon to tell whether Pelosi's gambit will pay off. I think if John Bolton does end up testifying, then that's going to be a big thing that's going to force a lot of moderate Republicans to really reconsider their position.
So now I want to jump into a more substantial debate about the witnesses. If you've been watching the Senate trial, tuning into coverage, you'll probably agree with me that at this point right now, it seems like the main topic of debate has been less the articles and more the, those are impeachable offenses, the actual high crimes and misdemeanors, and more about this question of witnesses. Not just if they should appear, but also when and who exactly. And to make it more interesting, this debate isn't really clear-cut. Particularly, some Republicans are taking more of a center-right stance on the debacle. Here's one of those, Senator Mitt Romney of Utah.
Well, I think it's important to hear from John Bolton and perhaps other witnesses, obviously from both the defense as well as the prosecution. The right time for that vote, that decision, is after the opening arguments. That's the way the process was carried out during the Clinton impeachment.
All right, so here's a question I want to ask out of that one, and it has three parts. I said this wasn't clear-cut. First off, A, should witnesses be allowed to testify? B, does the timing matter, before opening statements, after opening statements? And C, if you had the power to subpoena a witness right now, who would the most important one be and why? Louis, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, sure. So first off, just with the video, as a Democrat, this is something that I've never really said before, but I do agree with Mitt Romney. I think to have a fair trial, you need to bring witnesses in, and then they will tell the story. If the witnesses let Trump off, and that is what it is, then that's what it is. What was the second question?
When? Before, after opening statements, does it not matter?
So I think that, opening statements have already been made. So I would say after opening statements, and let's just have a fair trial. Let's let senators ask questions, and let's get to the bottom of what really happened.
The important thing.
The most important witness. I'd say John Bolton. Yeah.
Okay.
John Bolton.
Julian, you wanted to hop in there?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the most important thing is that there are witnesses. That's absolutely necessary for a fair trial. I'm quite sure that Democrats, if there isn't a fair trial, that this is in fact a cover-up, then what we'll see is that Democrats will take this to the Supreme Court, because no one in their right mind will say that a fair trial will not have witnesses, evidence presented.
You do think that this, though, will be brought to the Supreme Court if a subpoena is defied?
If there isn't a fair trial because witnesses are not called.
Even if an election is now this year, you do think that Democrats would take that plunge?
I think they should.
Interesting. Republicans, what do you guys think?
Well, just to respond, I do agree with Senator Romney as well, that it is important for the senators to have an opportunity to take all of the evidence that could be presented to them and use that to make their decision. And I think it is also important that the answer to your first question is directly related to the second. It is supposed to happen after opening statements, which have not even concluded to this point. The Republicans still have the weekend into Monday to make their defense on behalf of the president. On behalf of the president. And the idea that, House Democrats want to get this big emotional win at the beginning of the impeachment trial to get these witnesses put on by, trying to pressure the so-called moderate Republicans into agreeing with their bullying tactics is absolutely ridiculous.
If I can only add there, we explicitly are seeing here the Senate shall have the sole power of impeachment, and Nancy Pelosi is like, oh, I'm going to hold on to the articles for 33 days until I'm going to get this leverage, and this is how we're gonna do this. Like, no, there is a process here. Mitch McConnell's following similarly rules based on the Clinton impeachment trial, and I think that there should be a vote on witnesses. At the end of it, if people want to see,
how do you think that vote should go?
However the Senate decides it should go at that point. The Senate is the greatest deliberative body in the world, and it is up to them.
Not quite sure about that.
I want to jump into an interesting notion that's being tossed around in the halls of the Senate, halls of the Capitol, and also on the media. Some Republicans are saying, okay, Democrats, you guys want witnesses? Sure, bring in Hunter Biden.
Yeah, I think
Chuck Schumer has responded saying, in no way will we have this trade deal, this witness trade for Hunter Biden. No way, but I first want to hear from the Democrats.
Sure.
What would you guys respond to that? If witnesses are so important, why don't you think some Democrats are going all the way and saying, fine, bring Hunter Biden in, then we get our people too?
Well, here's the thing with Hunter Biden. It doesn't really pertain to what is happening here. Because when Vice President Biden got the Ukrainian prosecutor fired, the investigation into Burisma, which was the company that Hunter Biden worked for, was dormant. There's no evidence of Hunter Biden doing any wrongdoing. What the Republicans are trying to do here is frame Joe Biden as corrupt because they are afraid that he will beat Donald Trump if he is the Democratic nominee, and to try to sabotage Joe Biden and his family through that process. So I think that would be a solely political move, and it has nothing to do with what Donald Trump did.
What's the response on the right?
Right. Look, Michael, this is just a clear case of whataboutism. There's 2 articles of impeachment. One is, abuse of power. 2 is obstruction of Congress. Hunter Biden can't tell us anything about either of those.
So then if he can't say anything, then why not bring him in, and then you definitely get your witnesses?
It's irrelevant. And the whataboutism is the reason why this is bad.
It's clear you don't want him.
There is
you
always
can be honest that you don't want him to go on television.
Because he's going to be asked questions by Republicans which don't even pertain to what we're discussing. We're talking about Donald Trump abusing his power and obstructing Congress.
That's exactly the argument you're trying to make.
You're impeaching him over this phone call, this July 25th call, and in the call, I mean, you can see the transcript that has been released.
Don't forget, he also asked China to investigate Biden and Warren on live TV.
We're not going to bring.
Well,
we can't.
yeah, that's irrelevant.
Let's focus on just what we're looking at.
Also want
right
it
now.
noted that a Bernie Sanders stumper was the last person to accuse Joe Biden of corruption. So putting it all at the feet of the president is not exactly a very fair way to characterize the.
I'm going to cut you off there. I'm going to cut you off there. I want to get one more question in because then we have to move on to our next topic. Nancy Pelosi says that all roads lead to Putin. I think all roads lead to 2020 because there's a relation to 2020 for every topic. So my question is, we right now have 4 Democratic candidates who have been on the Senate floor all this week, being impartial jurors in this Senate impeachment trial, yet their competitors are in Iowa, checking out New Hampshire. Like we said, the caucus is less than 10 days away. What effect do you think this will have on the 2020 election? Really quick responses from both sides. We'll go to the Republicans first.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously conjecture, but I mean, there are folks who are saying that Nancy Pelosi held on to the articles for 33 days or whatever, so it would help out a more moderate candidate like Biden or Buttigieg in Iowa, keeping folks like Sanders and Warren inside the Senate. I mean, I don't know. I can only see it helping Biden or Buttigieg. I mean, they're not getting a lot of face time here in the Senate trial.
Democrats, quick response.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to really have much of an effect. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, they've deployed their surrogates across Iowa and New Hampshire, and then they also have the opportunity to be at the center of the national political stage through this process, and I think that their supporters know that. I don't think it's going to have much of an effect at all.
And then one question, if you were on the Senate floor, would you order milk or water?
Obviously milk.
Obviously milk.
I think it's important to stay hydrated. I go with water. I don't know.
All right. That's it with impeachment. We'll have to
Good.
end our segment there. But after this, we'll take you to the Middle East and we'll discuss the rising tensions with Iran and what this means for the region. Stay tuned.
Raise high. This isn't just our battle cry. It's our call, our challenge. Because when you were called to Washington, you were called to higher expectations, to a higher standard. We are called here to advance knowledge, to serve society, to change the world. Is that too lofty? Too aspirational? Is it simply too much to expect? Not if your classroom is a Smithsonian, the IMF, or on the doorstep of the Supreme Court. Not if you have access to the most hallowed institutions and formidable leaders. Not if you are given the tools to change minds, shape laws, influence entire fields of study, advance our way of life, change the course of history. From the nation's capital to the 4 corners of the earth, to far below the surface and far beyond our atmosphere. Here, unique opportunities, the ones that many people work much of their lives to get, are within your reach from the moment you arrive. This is where you find new pathways for preventing global epidemics, where your unexpected friend propels a new scientific movement forward. This is where you push forward as a team to break records and reach new heights. Where your classroom is 68 square miles of the most consequential land on Earth. This is where you will make it happen. This is the George Washington University, and what we make is history. So stand up, be bold, take risks, press on, push harder, raise high.
Welcome back. Now for some international news. While 2020 is an election year, it didn't begin by discussing healthcare, taxes, gun reform. Instead, the hot topic out of the gate was Iran, after President Trump ordered the killing of their top military general, Qasem Soleimani. But before we dive in, let's run through the timeline because the series of events here is very important. First, on December 27th, a rocket was launched at a U.S. military camp in Iraq, killing an American contractor and wounding other military personnel. U.S. authorities said an Iranian-backed militia was responsible for this attack. In response, just 2 days later, the U.S. ordered airstrikes on 5 facilities in Iraq and Syria that sources say are linked to some of the Iranian militia groups, which that attack killed at least 25 people. But it wasn't over after that. It wasn't a simple tit for tat, you strike me, I strike you situation. 4 days later, on New Year's Day, Iraqi military men, along with their followers, broke into and set fire to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. No Americans died. And then, just 2 days later, on January 3rd, reports came out that Qasem Soleimani, Iran's top military general and intelligence commander, one of the highest officials in the country, was killed in a drone strike at an airport in Baghdad. Now, soon after the news hit, it became clear that President Trump was behind this attack. But of course, things didn't end there, and in retaliation on January 7th, Iran fired over a dozen missiles at U.S. military camps in Baghdad. No lives were lost. Injuries did occur, but the message was clear. Tensions are rising. And that's where we are now. President Trump did signal that he would not be jolting back at Iran, but in the world we live in today, it's pretty certain to say that nothing is certain. So let's discuss. Hunter, we'll go to you first. Do you think it was the right move for U.S. forces to kill leader Soleimani? Of course, he is by no means a good man. He has American blood on his hands, but this was quite the escalation. Do you think it was strategically a smart move?
Well, first, Michael, I have to thank you for kind of the outlining of all of the events escalating to this, because I think a lot of the folks, I mean, in the media as well, they just kind of got this news headline and are like, what's Trump doing now?
Context is important.
And here we have these escalative events that are happening. I mean, what do they think's going to happen after, as you had said, Soleimani had killed the blood on the hands of like so many Americans, even through the Iraq War. I mean, the building of IEDs. I mean, it's awful hearing some of these stories about this man. And then, of course, with any kind of action in the Middle East, it is going to it's going to blow up.
Understood. A lot of escalation, but was this the correct next move in that escalation?
Yeah, I mean, it may be an oversimplification here, but there was a bad situation before, and I think it's a bad situation now. At least now we have one more bad guy dead.
Fair enough. Democrats?
Let's talk about context, because this all started in 1953 when we ousted a democratically elected Saudi Arabian leader. Saudi Arabian. Did I say that?
You said that. You can continue.
Okay. Democratically elected leader. So because of that, that context means that a lot of this lead up, we can't divorce that from the historical nature of all the events. The important thing to recognize is that Trump didn't do this to kill a bad guy. You should have no illusions about that. He did this because he thinks it will help his 2020 election chances.
Well, I just want to step you back there. I don't know if it's fair to say he didn't do this to kill a bad man. We don't know that. So to be fair to both sides of the aisle.
There is a video of him during the Obama administration where he said that Obama is going to strike Iran because he thinks it'll help his election chances. We know that Trump.
Fair enough, but that was Obama. So I just want to be fair to both sides here. But continue. No, you carry on. No? Nothing? Okay.
Oh, no, wait.
I would like to respond.
Go for it. Whoever wants to respond.
No. Well, look, here's the deal. When he struck Soleimani and killed him, and again, I'm not mourning his loss. No Democrats mourning his loss. No American is mourning his loss. Okay, I'll just say that, and I think that some Republicans have attacked Democrats as crying about terrorists dying. This is a totally false mischaracterization. But I think that what President Trump did was it was a mistake, because either killing him and making him a martyr or allowing him to live, I think that allowing him to live would be a net safer move. Of course, in the long run, is the world going to be better off with him dead? Possibly. But what happened in the immediate aftermath, there were so many deaths. There were American troops that were attacked at an embassy in retaliation. And then overall, the administration, they just didn't have they didn't have a strategy. They did not have right after the
what
attack
would you
occurred.
want
They didn't know what they were doing.
What do you
They didn't have
want
a
him to do?
strategy.
Well, first of all, he didn't present any evidence
We're gonna get to
This
that.
as to him
classified
plotting an imminent
information.
threat. Well, he didn't present any evidence to Congress, and Congress has to approve
I'm going to jump
to
in
declare war.
because we're going to get to that. We're going to get
That
to
he
more
didn't
powers
declare
resolution.
war.
We're going to get to all that. I want to just
Well, it
make
was
our
an
way
act
through
of
the
war,
story.
what they did, yeah.
Okay, so first off, what I want to hit is that a lot of people throughout Capitol Hill and throughout the country are saying, why now? Why did President Trump decide to order this strike on Soleimani now? And the reason why that question is being asked is because Soleimani, he was a well-known guy. His whereabouts were known. He was a visible guy. This wasn't like Baghdadi where he had to be tracked down, and once we had his location, we had to hang on to that. The U.S. has had Soleimani's location in the past. We've had the opportunity to strike him in the past. So why do you think this happened now? Different State Department officials and intelligence officials are citing imminent threats. We haven't heard those. So I want to ask you, do you think that we can believe that there were imminent threats? And do you think that it was suitable to strike him right now?
I absolutely think it's credible to believe that there were imminent threats. I mean, it is no secret that relations between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the U.S. are not the greatest they've ever been, even in the immediate past. So the idea that Qasem Soleimani is out there in Iraq, in Syria, trying to foment forces and through his proxies, given weapons through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, is trying to foment a situation that leads to American lives being lost. I think it is not only absolutely credible, but it is highly likely that that is the situation that the American government was responding to in taking him out. And I mean, we've avoided saying the word, but Qasem Soleimani was a State Department-defined terrorist. He was a person who used his influence and his proxies to harm Americans, to harm American strategic interests.
Absolutely, not doubting that.
Yeah.
But do you think that this specific moment was the right time to take him out?
Yes.
Well, I asked the question, what else would you want them to do after the killing of the American contractor, after the attack on the embassy, after an apparent forthcoming attack on diplomatic officials here? I mean, I think it was Chris Murphy or one of the Democratic senators who put out something before this that said something like, Trump is weak on Iran, you know, he's not taking any action, you know, what the heck's going on? He does this, and it's like, oh, this is terrible. You know, it goes back to this point
Understood, but just something that's important. Understood, but just something that's important to be mentioned is that a lot of people are saying that Soleimani was the equivalent to Mike Pence. Some are saying he was the second top
Mike Pence
leader.
isn't
Mike
a
Pence isn't
terrorist.
the exact. That's such a false.
It is not an act of
equivalence
war
to try and draw.
kill a terrorist. I mean,
That's a fair response.
I think that getting back to your point, Defense Secretary Mark Esper couldn't even confirm what Donald Trump said, and Donald Trump said that there were 4 imminent attacks that Soleimani was plotting. There were 4 sites that he was plotting to attack Americans or our allies in the region. The administration doesn't even have in my view, their lies straight. They have not presented any evidence whatsoever that Qasem Soleimani was planning an imminent attack. This is exactly what happened in Iraq with the weapons of mass destruction. They were lying us to war.
All right, well, I don't want to go into Iraq. I want to move on to the next question because this isn't just about the strike. This is about, well, what happens after and the state of the Middle East. So just days after Soleimani was killed, President Putin made an impromptu visit to Bashar al-Assad in Syria, indicating that tensions are rising in the Middle East. So do you think that the U.S. should take action to de-escalate in the Middle East? And if you were the president sitting in the Situation Room, what's your strategy? Whoever wants to pick it up first.
Oh, geez, you know, that's a loaded question there. I mean, no idea, no idea on that. Like,
but do you think that tension should be de-escalated in the Middle East?
Well, I mean, you should always be looking to de-escalate tensions, when you have the option. I mean, when you're being attacked, I think it warrants a response, as in this case with Iran. But I think Syria and Russia are a whole other discussion in this. I mean, should we be pulling, troops out of the Middle East in general? Sure, as long as they're non-essential forces, I think it's important to keep, some stability in the region, but...
Democrats?
Well, I mean, for one, we've seen an increase of troops in the Middle East. But I think that this just gets back to what Donald Trump did by pulling out of the Iran deal. While Europe was telling him not to, our allies around the world were telling him not to. The deal, in large part, was working. I think that down the line, it needed to be renegotiated. But for 10 to 15 years, it prevented them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Right now, there are no restrictions on Iran getting a nuclear weapon, and I think that that is a major threat to our security. But him just pulling out of the Iran deal, that alone was an escalation in tensions. It was by and large working, and there were some components that needed to be renegotiated, and I understand that. But pulling out and having no backup plan, I think that that just set us on the path to war
what would
that
you
we're on right now.
So do you have a strategy for de-escalation or an idea for de-escalation? How would you carry it out?
So I believe in diplomacy as the ultimate goal of foreign policy, so I think that bringing Iran back to the table. But this all has to come with leadership change. That is why Donald Trump has to be voted out this November. He has no credibility with Iran. He has no credibility really with any of our allies or adversaries around the world. And
I don't think any.
Republicans,
Okay.
the last word on this question, then we have to get to one more question. So quick response.
I think this is why we saw the president's election in the first place. You know, we're talking about, you know, using this diplomacy and olive branch stuff when we're talking about terrorism. And I think it's important to extend the olive branch, you know, when necessary, and it's important to, you know, use the arrows as well. Like it's important to kind of have both. And in this case, I just don't see it any different.
Last question. On January 9th, bipartisan vote, the House passed a war powers resolution. The vote was 224 to 194 in an attempt to limit the president's ability to declare war during these tensions in Iran. Now, the president is the commander-in-chief. He's the leader of the military, but the Constitution gives the legislative branch the power to declare war. So the question here is, do you think that this will now pass in the Senate, but do you think it'll have enough votes to then go against the president's what will probably be veto, and then the Congress will need 2/3 vote to then override this veto?
It's important to remember that Mike Lee, that same guy who came out of that meeting and said, look, there's no evidence that there's an imminent attack, and Trump is lying to you.
That's definitely not what he said.
And he's the one who co-sponsored that war powers resolution. There's no doubt that, you know, with effort from both sides, that is bipartisan, that it can be passed.
Republicans, quick response.
Maybe we can get the fact checkers on that one.
Well, fact checkers are working, but still, give your response.
I would just like to say, personally, this war powers resolution, what it does is it limits the president's ability to maintain a presence in Iran after 30 days. Is the main bulk of it, and it limits the president's ability to basically move troops into Iran permanently without declaring an actual war, which is the sole power of the Congress. I absolutely welcome this sort of resolution. It would not have prevented the type of targeted strike that took out a terrorist in the form of Qasem Soleimani that occurred just weeks ago. So I do not think that this war powers resolution is anything more than a symbol for Democrats to give their voters and say, you know, we're taking on President Trump, and that the actual context and content of the bill is completely within the realm of what is fair.
All that tells us is that it doesn't go far enough. So yeah, you know, we should continue to limit Trump's war powers so he doesn't nuke us all.
All right, we're going to
nuke us.
All right, we got to end the conversation there. I don't think that this issue is going away. There'll be much to talk about in the coming weeks.
I'm sure there will be.
So we'll end that there. Last word on that. But after the break, it's rapid fire. Stay with us.
Hi, Colonials. Did you know there are hundreds of ways for you to volunteer with GW? Each year, over 1,500 alumni, parents, and friends contribute thousands of hours to make our community stronger. There are countless ways you can volunteer, so it's easy to choose an opportunity that is most meaningful to you, like connecting with students and alumni based on your student involvement, identity, or personal interests. Getting involved with your local alumni network. Mentoring a current student via our online mentoring platform. Connecting with prospective students through undergraduate admissions opportunities, serving on an industry network leadership council, becoming a social media ambassador. The list goes on. No matter where you are in the world or how much time you have to give, you can connect and volunteer with GW. And the best part, it's easy to get involved. Just visit alumni.gwu.edu/volunteer to learn more about these and other opportunities. Because of your service to GW, you are able to make a direct impact on the lives of former, current, and future students. We look forward to working with you. Raise high.
Our panel joins us now for rapid fire, some quick answers to some quick questions. And first off, obviously 2020, it is finally 2020. So at this point in the race, the number of debates to go is decreasing. Some are pretty happy about that. The number of candidates decreasing, but the competition is becoming more and more fierce. Because in this election cycle, we're looking at a different type of competition, and that's specifically within the Democratic Party, which was proven true in the New York Times' tradition of endorsing or now some, presidential candidates. Breaking with tradition, for the first time since its founding in 1851, the Times endorsed 2 candidates, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar. Why, you may ask? Well, the Times' editorial board explained that Democrats are faced with an important decision within the party, to either vote moderate or to vote progressive. The board said that the similarities of platforms between the progressive candidates and then the moderate candidates were, quote, striking, and that the election is not about the what, but it's about the how. So not about if universal health care should be implemented, but how it should be. That's the main concern within the Democratic Party. So basically, we have 2 parties within the big tent Democratic Party. My question to you all is, what does this mean for the Democratic Party? A, do you think it's good? Because, you know, we have a variety of ideas, different sects, there's a place for people, there's a place for everyone, or are we kind of taking away, and in a way is the Democratic Party hurting themselves because their voters aren't rallying around a single candidate to take on the president? We'll go to the Democrats first. Louis, what are you thinking?
So I think that we need a robust discussion over how we achieve these things, but to your point, it's about how we achieve these goals. All Democrats are for the same things, like achieving universal health care, strengthening background checks, and ensuring that we combat climate change in a robust way. And I think that the discussion that we're seeing right now is a very constructive debate over the best ways to achieve it. So I do think that the New York Times endorsement is actually a good thing, because they're just saying that, oh, Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar, they have different approaches to working towards the same goals.
You think it'll hurt your party, though? No, you're not rallying around a single candidate.
Well,
Iowa's in less than 10 days.
You know, that's what a primary process is for. I think that at the end of the day, Democrats are going to realize that any person up here is far better than Donald Trump, and I would hope that they rally behind the eventual nominee.
Zach, what are your thoughts?
I don't have an opinion on whether or not it's a good thing that the New York Times endorsed 2 Democrats running for president.
Not that they endorsed, not talking about the Times. Let's not go again after the Times now. Just talking about, meaning, I guess I didn't word it properly, just the current state of the party. The Times sort of supplemented the idea that right now we're looking at a different type of race.
I mean, I enjoy watching the Democrats take each other on, because you can talk about how it's not the what, it's the how that's important, but the differences between how you're going to implement these various policies they claim they all agree on are just staggering.
Julian, what do you think about your party?
So I think it's not just about how. It is about a difference of vision for the future, and the Democrat that has, the candidate who has the best vision, that unites the most people, that rallies people's passions about how they want the world to look like in the future, that's the person who's going to win.
But do you think it'll hurt your party?
I don't think so. Fundamentally, I believe that Democrats, they'll unite around a single candidate by the time November comes around.
Hunter, jump in here.
I mean, as much as I wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to rag on the New York Times, I think it's a fine thing.
You're in the School of Media and Public Affairs right now. We don't rail on the media. Thank you very much. Carry on.
No, I mean it's true. I mean, there's a huge split in the Democratic Party. They didn't want to take a stance. They endorsed them both. Like, there's a lot of different ideas going around. Is it hurting them now? Maybe. I mean, once they rally around a candidate and they have a nominee, I think they'll be fine. I mean, just look back to 2016, and in my opinion, on the Republican side, was much more of a brutal primary. And at the end, even Donald Trump, which a lot of folks weren't behind in the primary, everyone kind of rallied around, and he ended up winning. So I don't think it much matters what the New York Times is doing.
All right. We'll now move on to some economic policy. On December 19th, right before the House fled Washington for the holidays, they voted to pass USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Now, this deal, which struggled to secure enough votes for passage over the past year, will essentially replace NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement. It passed in the Senate earlier this month, and now it will head to the president's desk, where it will almost definitely receive his signature. This was one of his highest economic priorities. So in your guys' opinion, do you think this was an improvement from NAFTA, and what kind of effects do you think we'll see in the U.S.? Hunter, we'll go to you first.
I mean, it's definitely an improvement on NAFTA. It's still, a large portion of the USMCA is NAFTA. I mean, probably 80% or so of it. But I mean, you're seeing in USMCA increased auto manufacturing and higher wages. There's some stuff on like the pharmaceutical industry tapping them down on. I think overall it is a great deal much better than what we had, and I think that's evident by having people like the Republicans, but also like Elizabeth Warren, voting for this.
Some bipartisanship. It's crazy. Did you ever think it could happen in this town? Zach, what are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree with Hunter. The USMCA, the critics who were saying that it's, like Hunter said, 80% NAFTA, are really missing that the changes that were made from NAFTA to the USMCA were all great changes. I think 75% of car parts have to be manufactured within the 3 countries in the agreement. Pay, I think, between 25 and a third of the employees making these cars have to make at least $16.50 an hour, which will reduce the push to so many jobs going to countries because of lower wages. And I think the intelligent rights for, patent protections and agricultural purchases included in the agreement will absolutely be a boon to all 3 economies.
Julian?
I think some of the labor protections are moving towards a good path, but fundamentally, USMCA won't change much from NAFTA. A large portion of the jobs lost, et cetera, that have been blamed on NAFTA are really a result of automation. So this will not change much and won't save people's jobs.
Louis, last word?
Yeah, so I do think that it's a net improvement on NAFTA. I think that one thing that I would hope that a Democratic president would renegotiate next year when we elect one is added environmental protections, because climate change is the pressing issue of our time, and it is not addressing that in a sufficient manner. But overall, like Julian said, there's an increase in labor protections. Sherrod Brown, who's a big union guy in the Senate, he voted for it, citing those increased labor protections, and I think that it's a net good, but we have not reached the ultimate goal, in my view.
All right.
Yeah.
Last topic we have. A big day is right around the corner in the U.S. Hint, it's not the Iowa caucus, it's the Super Bowl. And I don't mean the 2020 election, which is basically Washington's Super Bowl these days. I mean like the real Super Bowl. Football, stadiums. Super Bowl 54 will kick off from sunny Miami on February 2nd, the day before Iowa, obviously I have to mention Iowa, with the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it's a tradition here on Crossfire to ask our political experts who they see taking home the trophy, but this year we have our eyes on another competition on Super Bowl Sunday. We would love to hear your opinions. It's the political ad competition. Some people are saying it's more crazy than the actual Super Bowl. In early January, Mike Bloomberg's campaign running for the Democratic Party, he announced that they purchased a 60-second ad for the Super Bowl that cost, a modest $10 million. It's pocket change these days. But literally hours later, the Trump campaign responded, said that they too took out a 60-second ad for the Super Bowl. Another $10 million. You can't make this up. So my question is, first, who in the Super Bowl we have to ask, but second, who's going to win the political ad competition? Who's going to be better? Are they going to be right after each other? Are they going to be going for each other? I mean, $20 million is a big competition. Louis, jump in first.
Yeah, so just on the football game, I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that Patrick Mahomes will overpower the 49ers defensive line. I think it's going to be a very close game. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be much better than the Trump ad that's going to air. As for, look, if it's Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump, not an ideal scenario for myself. I will vote for Michael Bloomberg. I will enjoy watching the Michael Bloomberg ad, and I'll use the restroom when Trump's is on TV. Yeah.
Julian?
Yeah, I don't think people go to the Super Bowl to watch commercial ads.
What are you talking about? Who cares about the football? Continue.
I, however, do not watch or follow football. But, 49ers are from San Francisco, and I'm a Californian, so never vote against the home team.
Zach?
I just want to note that the Super Bowl doesn't matter as much as the others because my beloved New England Patriots are not in it. Shout out to the GOAT, number 12.
For like the first time in so long. They can take a break.
Number 12, you're the best. But as far as who's going to win, as much as I hate to admit it, I'm not a fan of Andy Reid's, but I do think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to take it. And as far as the political ad bowl goes, I don't know. Mini Mike Bloomberg's ads have been inundating my YouTube as of late, and they haven't impressed me quite all that much. So I think the Trump team will come up with something a little more compelling.
Hunter, last word.
I was down in Missouri over break with my mom. I gotta go with the Chiefs as well. I don't know. I think they're pretty much the favorite, but With the ads, though, obviously Michael Bloomberg, this is his only kind of chance right here. He's not really going into these early states, so he's banking on, just dumping all of his money into these big ads. Is it going to work? I don't know. I mean, it's got to be something outside the box, I think, that's really going to capture kind of everyone's mind. The Super Bowl ad isn't just like that 60 seconds. You're buying kind of the hype of, oh, he bought a Super Bowl ad. So we'll see what each of the campaigns comes up with. I think Bloomberg's got to really knock it out of the park to stay in this.
All right, you guys want my thoughts? In terms of the football, I'm going to turn to my friends at Unstoppable to get their guidance because they know way more than me than football. But for the ads, obviously Chick-fil-A and Bud Light are always the winners of the ad game. No one can mess with them. They're too good at it. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to end things there. Louis Kahn, Julian Anderson, Zach Laba, Hunter Wilson. Amazing debate, really interesting discussion. Appreciate you guys coming on. When we come back, Willow Hassan has her debate fact check. Stay with us.
Universities like George Washington play a critical role in hosting debate and discourse on events of the day.
The right answer is not to refuse the other. The right answer is not to say, get rid of this religion. It's not part of us. It's wrong.
I think that the story of America is a story of race. So when I think of the questions that I'm asking or the stories that I'm going to write, I'm thinking, okay, well, what are we learning about our country?
Well, I think the likelihood of him being indicted is close to 100%. There was a lot of hurdles that had to be cleared in order for that to happen.
One of the reasons that Donald Trump is president is because there is such a frustration with the way that Washington functions.
Sympathy is one thing, but empathy is the language of recovery, and it's something that's without a doubt instilled into every person that's in recovery.
It's never lead with the positive, it's always lead with the perceived negative.
Well, that is part of the problem. I mean, I actually would agree with you on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One of the things that we have seen that is most under siege in this country is the notion of civil discourse, and we here at GW, among other things, very much want to stand for that.
This is truly an only at GW moment.
Welcome back. During our panel discussion, a team of fact-checkers monitor our debate. Willow Hassan is here to fill us in on what we missed. Willow.
Our debaters came prepared for today's debate with very few errors. However, some clarifications need to be made. Democrat Louis Kahn claimed that Mitch McConnell said that he did not want a fair impeachment trial for Donald Trump. Although McConnell has said that he does not want a long trial, he has not said that he does not want a fair trial. Republican Zach Laba said that, according to the USMCA deal, employees must make $16.50 an hour. However, the deal actually requires the 40 to 45% of auto content be made by employees earning at least $16 per hour. And that's all for the fact check. Back to you, Michael.
All right, well, that's all for this episode of Colonial Crossfire. Be sure to check us out online at www.gw-tv.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram and like us on Facebook. And if you have strong political beliefs and want to voice them to the GW community, please reach out to the Crossfire team via either email or social media. We'd love to have you on the show. And one more time, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2020, the year of the election. Leave you with two things: be civil and stick to the facts. Very important. For all of us here at GW TV, I'm Michael Schnell. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you right back here next time.